found, and it's this. Probably one of the best leaders that I have ever met in my life, I met in rehab. And he wasn't a staff member, he was a client. And he, like I, had a checkered past. When I entered Isaiah House in 2013, I noticed my friend. He was always encouraging others, and he was always inspiring others to achieve their dreams, to dream big, to dream the impossible. And he was always thinking creatively, and he had the determination and tenacity to accomplish his goals. My friend would go on to help hundreds of people advance their education, improve their lives, and transform their communities. And most importantly, he was not alone. Over the course of that year at Isaiah House, I noticed something very interesting within that facility. There were guys everywhere that were given the shirts off of their backs just to help somebody in need. They would always pick somebody up when they were down. People who had lots of checkered pasts. They were able to become instruments of great change in the lives of others. And with that information, with that observation, what I did, I turned that into the topic of my dissertation in 2019. And 3 years later, I defended it and earned my PhD. That topic was the leadership traits of people with substance use disorder. That topic, that publication was in 2 articles. Most recently, it was published by the Journal of Addiction Therapy and Research. And that topic led also to a second study that includes over 140 participants all across the Commonwealth. And it's the foundation for the trait-based model of recovery, which you're about to hear about. You see, guys, it matters where we start. And for too long, addiction treatment has started with the problem. And instead, we should start with a solution. And you see, the solution is hidden within the problem. The solution is hidden within the destructive behaviors. And the solution are these hidden treasures, or otherwise known as character traits, personality traits, and experiences. Bottom line, when you build from this foundation, when you build upon these treasures, when you build upon these traits, you're starting from within, from the place of absolutes. You're starting from the essentials, the essence of who someone really is. And that's where life is found. And that's where shame and guilt and humiliation, hopelessness and isolation disappear and erode. And what steps to the center stage is a recovery journey filled with confidence, dignity, commitment, and purpose. Over the course of the next 30 minutes or so, our aim is to show you how starting from strength can change the way addiction treatment is viewed. So today's learning objectives will be this. We're going to identify the leadership traits of people with substance use disorder. You heard that right. The leadership traits of people with substance use disorder. And I'm not just talking about recovery. I'm talking about traits which are present within active addiction. We're going to describe how those traits play a vital role in both the addictive behavioral patterns and leadership abilities of those with substance use disorder. And then we're going to discover how identifying these traits can be combined with solutions-focused therapy, leadership development, and entrepreneurial opportunities to create an effective model of recovery. And so what we're presenting to you today is the trait-based model of recovery. And so first we're going to take an aerial view and kind of give you the overview, so to speak, of what this model represents. And so it is a model which builds upon the strengths of people. It doesn't begin at the deficiency or at the deficit. It actually begins with the positive view. It begins with the strengths that people in addiction possess. And it's also person-centered. It is individualized or customized to each individual person, tailored to suit and to fit their strengths and their characteristics. And this model is also dynamic, meaning that it continually assesses which approaches are most productive, and then it informs itself immediately, right? Lending itself to continuous improvement with the client, the clinician, and the community. And so this all began, like I said, 4 years ago in 2019 when I started to research a 3-year study, including 15 participants. And the findings from that study was actually published in, like I said earlier, the Journal of Addiction Research and Therapy. And so that study lent itself to another study. And so we're currently carrying out a second study following that includes over 140 participants, again, all across Kentucky. And there were 21 themes that were found from that initial study that are being further developed and explored in the second study. Again, those 21 themes were personality traits, character traits, and experiences. 3 categories which show that people in addiction have these same traits as those who are considered great leaders. Now, those 21 themes were distilled down into 10 traits which are present in those that are caught in active addiction. You may think that I'm crazy, but just pay attention, hang on. I'll prove it to you. Out of those 10 traits, we further noticed 4 which were very, very prominent in the lives of those with substance use disorder. Those 4 prominent traits are resilience, creativity, gratitude, and self-awareness. The research team was myself, Dr. Eric Carter, Brian Privet, and Dr. Dan Phillips. And out of those 4, only 1 has a past history with substance abuse. Guess who? And so the methodology for these slides and these studies was quantitative and qualitative, right? So we've done an exploratory study, interviews, observations, and now we followed that with a survey that was distributed across, like I said earlier, over 140 or 123 participants. 63 questions which have now been used to identify or assess the strengths of someone in addiction. All right, and then beyond that, we see a table here that kind of groups authentic and transformative leadership dimensions or characteristics on the left side. So those are all the academic terms or phrases for what qualifies someone as either a transformative or an authentic leader. And then on the right side, those are a collection of those 21 themes originally, which mapped on to those leadership dimensions. And so what we begin to see was something very, very important. First of all, transformational leadership. Transformational leadership has far more to do with interior ways of knowing and imparting those ways of knowing than focusing on external structures and processes. Again, transformational leadership is about something that takes place within, that people who are transformative leaders are able to impart or share that with others. So this trait-based model at its core is a path of self-awareness or spirituality, however you want to phrase it, and how that understanding can be shared and connected with others around them. And so here are the 10 leadership traits found in addiction. And I'll clarify even further, active addiction. Tenacity, resilience, empathy, authenticity. People with substance use disorder are motivational, right? They're self-aware, they're creative, socially intelligent. They have a high mark of determination, amen? And they have a high mark of appreciation. And so what we're going to do with this model is, instead of beginning with the problem, we're going to begin with the strength. We're going to begin with the good stuff. right? And so essentially this model empowers people. It empowers people because it's unique to each person, and it provides support for them to reach their full potential. So another benefit of building on strength is that it's not a cookie-cutter approach. It's not a one-size-fits-all model of treatment or recovery. It allows the client, allows the person in addiction to participate in their own individual treatment plan, and it broadens the definition of what success really means. So why does our starting point matter? So instead of focusing exclusively on problems and failures, which is typically what the traditional model does, right? The trait-based model allows clinicians to acknowledge that every person has a unique set of strengths or traits that allow them to connect to others and allow them to overcome challenges in life. It matters from where we start. It also matters because the trait-based approach aligns itself with mental health recovery by focusing on a person's ability and helping to build confidence and purpose and hope for the recovery journey ahead. Studies have shown that beginning on the strength level, or beginning with the strengths-based approach, it's linked to positive recovery outcomes, improved behavioral patterns, and life satisfaction. We believe that nearly all environments contain resources that help individuals achieve or develop their strengths. Also, this approach is an asset-based approach, which results in improved self-confidence, understanding, and momentum for the recovery journey ahead. Now, the trait-based model of recovery. So there's 4 phases to this model, right? And if you can follow along at the upper left, you see trait identification, which this is a process, a collaborative process between the client and the clinician, the client and their families, the client and their relationship with their higher power, so to speak, or with God. And it's a dynamic learning process. That means it is continually informing itself. Also, you've got solutions-focused therapy, right? And so with the solutions-focused therapy, you're focused on the future, right? You're focused on not so much problems, but resolving or solving those issues and those challenges and those problems. Additionally, you've got entrepreneurial opportunities, and we're going to talk about each of these a little bit more a little bit later, but this is more than just employment opportunities. And it's more than just business ventures. When we talk of entrepreneurial opportunities, we're talking about areas that are often not considered entrepreneurial. For example, social justice initiatives, the creation of nonprofit organizations, ministerial opportunities, right? Connecting people in addiction and in recovery to these avenues that allow them to fully exercise and put into practice those strengths that they possess. And then finally, we've got a leadership academy. And the Leadership Academy, we'll talk about it a little more in a moment, but it's specific to those in recovery. Now, guiding principles of the trait-based model of recovery are this. It's obviously, again, person-centered, and it's dynamic. And it builds upon a positive understanding, beginning with the person's assets instead of their deficiencies. It's holistic, so it addresses the whole person, right? Psychological, biological, sociological, and it also includes external supports, right? We need external supports. We need people that we can connect with and opportunities to advance our natural calling. And of course, this model is transformative. Our view is that recovery should not be rigid. Van spoke earlier about our work on the commission, and we've done various town halls across the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And we've been encouraging people to be innovative and creative when we address the addiction issue. And so my conviction, right, and our conviction is that whatever works, works. We don't draw lines in the sand to say that we're not going to do this and we're not going to do that. We want to widen the avenue for others to enter into long-term recovery. We believe that recovery is best supported through relationships and social support. And it includes individual strengths, family strengths, community strengths. And recovery is ongoing. It never, ever stops. It's a continuous path of self-realization and of self-improvement and of social engagement. Recovery never ends. Now, again, back to the trait-based model. So at the foundation of this model is trait identification. And this, again, points to the traits that everyone possesses, the strengths that people in addiction possess, right? And this can be explored in collaboration with a clinician through self-discovery or spiritual practice such as meditation, right? Contemplation, contemplative prayer, reflection. It's really getting to know yourself. It's vital to this model. And it's vital to recovery. Because when we know ourselves, we know our triggers. When we know ourselves, we know our capabilities. And so at the ground level, instead of starting from the deficiencies, we're starting from the attributes. And this changes everything. And so the clinician employs a solutions-focused therapy approach, which again is future-focused, it's goal-directed, and it is evidence-based. Then the client is connected with entrepreneurial opportunities to allow for a broad application of these traits in various methods and ways. And again, it's not limited to business ventures. It includes a lot of spheres in our society today. And then the Leadership Academy, again, specifically designed for those in recovery. And it includes how to lead with authenticity and transparency. It focuses on relationship building and developing business acumen and social skills and transformative leadership principles. Now, central to the trait-based model of recovery is what I'm about to show you. But before I show you the next slide, I want to remind you of those 10 leadership traits that people in addiction have, right? There they are, and here is the transformational leadership or self-actualization process. I'm going to camp out here for a little bit because this is vital. This is important. All of these traits, those 10 traits that I just showed you, they all have a shadow side and a light side. A dark side and a bright side, so to speak. Psychologist Carl Jung was the first to coin those terms, but it's truthful, right? That we've got these shadow components of our personalities, of our character, right? And being aware of that advances us well in our recovery path. And so when these traits, those 10 traits, and we'll walk right through them in just a minute, when they're functioning on the shadow side or the negative side, they function to maintain addictive behavioral patterns. It protects the disease. But when these traits are functioning positively on the light side, they function to empower the recovery journey. Some examples. Tenacity. On the positive side, when a tenacious person is in your organization or your company, they are goal-focused, laser-focused, and they do not back down from anything. But that very same trait has always been in the life of a person with substance use disorder. And, at least in my case, it's usually been demonstrated in a negative fashion. We're socially disrupted. We won't take no for an answer on the shadow side. We won't say no that we're not going to get high today. We're not going to say no that we may not commit some criminal behavior in order to obtain what we're seeking, right? It's the same trait, but on the positive side, it's an asset to your organization. On the negative side, it is a damaging influence in society. Let's walk on down the list here. Resilience. It's a never give up attitude, right? You want a leader of your organization to be resilient. When bad things come, they don't walk away. They don't compromise. They keep their focus within the game. But also, in addiction, on the negative side, we can be pretty resilient at learning some difficult lessons. We repeat destructive behavior. Even though it takes us out, and I've nearly overdosed 4 times. I've been raided by the police twice. I've been arrested 18 times, but I was resilient in my addiction. Empathy. So on the positive side, empathy, it's a secondary trait. It's an emergent trait, right? Empathy is different from sympathy. Sympathy, you could say, is kind of like feeling sorry for someone, but empathy actually connects with someone else, and you feel the plight, you feel the burden of other people, you feel the pain and the struggle deep in the core of your being. That's a great trait. That's a positive trait. But that very same trait has a shadow side, and that shadow side is manipulation. Because people typically that are in addiction are so well astute at assessing the emotional state of others, or the cognitive, intellectual state of others, that we can identify that, and then we can map onto that, and then we can hijack that to make that person help us get what we need. Same trait, different demonstrations. Authenticity, right? And on the positive side, authenticity is great. You're transparent with your vulnerabilities, with your weaknesses, but unchecked on the shadow side, you're an emotional train wreck. Your emotions are uncontrolled, right? And you're being authentic, but you're authentically all over the place, which is what drugs do. They get us in such a daze, and they get us just completely off-center to where we're following this desire and we're following this difficulty, and we don't know which way is up and which way is down, right? And the motivational trait, right? On the positive side, you're able to inspire others, but on the shadow side, we can certainly, in active addiction, motivate other people to seek disastrous ends. Self-awareness. Positive side, a self-aware person admits their mistakes, but on the negative side, they're going to protect themselves at all costs. In denial, no, I didn't do that. I'm self-aware, and I'm going to keep you at an arm's distance. The next trait, creativity, right? Creativity allows us on the positive side to find solutions, but on the negative side, we become very creative with the excuses we make to remain in denial. Oh, I'm not that bad. You're the problem, not me. Social intelligence, another trait. Functioning on the positive side, it cultivates relationships. But on the negative side, it attempts to control others. Determination, right? On the positive side, a strong commitment, right? But on the negative side, a very strong commitment in spite of the risk that it receives. And appreciation, finally. On the positive side, appreciative people remain grateful. On the negative side, we're only appreciative when we're using. So how do you stay on the light side? It takes work, right? And that's kind of what this model is centered around. It's not a one and done type of interaction. It's a continuous process. It occurs in the office of the clinician. It occurs in the workplace setting, and it occurs at home, right? It takes work and it takes much learning to remain present in the moment. And this is why self-actualization is such an important component of this model, because we have to connect with the here and the now, and not think about yesterday, the mistakes we made, or the worries about tomorrow, because for us, many of us, whether you're in addiction or not, that can become too much. And so vital to this model is meditation or self-reflection, self-actualization, prayer, these types of practices to where you get to know who you really are. Functioning on the light side takes honest dialogue and communication with others, and honesty with self. We admit our mistakes, and we do uncomfortable work, and we never give up on ourselves. And those in recovery know this all too well. Now, back to the trait identification component of this model. This is accomplished through therapy and strength assessments tools. We're currently developing one of those now to identify which strengths are present within the lives of others and within ourselves. And I've already talked about self-realization and meditation, and there's some component here for plant medicine, and some studies are being carried out to determine its efficacy. But we're talking about becoming fully aware of who you really are, and connecting to others is an important component of trait identification because we get feedback. We may think that we're a compassionate person, but when we ask the right person, we're going to learn differently. And so we've got to engage in honest dialogue with others, and it allows for our unique set of traits to be identified and developed more fully in the entrepreneurial component, which Brian will share a little bit more about in just a minute. And so next phase would be the solutions-focused therapy. Now, I do want to say that these stages are not necessarily sequential, meaning they don't have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then repeat. They're dynamic, right? And so you can be learning your traits while you're in the entrepreneurial opportunity zone, so to speak. Or when you're in the leadership academy, you can begin to learn more about yourself, right? It is a living model, right? It is a living model of improving ourselves, right? And setting our feet to the recovery journey. So solutions-focused therapy, it focuses on solutions instead of problems and putting those solutions into action. Now, this type of therapy is brief, which makes it affordable, right? It can last anywhere from a few sessions up to 8 weeks, right? And so with that, it reduces the overall cost to the client or to the individual, right? And it develops critical thinking and empowerment. And the leadership academy. Again, an 8-week curriculum. It can be customized to fit residential treatment programs, IOP, or outpatient settings. And it's a curriculum, again, specifically designed for those in recovery. And it includes authentic and transformative leadership strategies. I want to say one thing about entrepreneurial opportunities, a couple things actually, before Brian comes up. A successful entrepreneur is a great storyteller. They know how to captivate their audience and build a brand around their story. And there's no better story than the story of the underdog, the story of the person who's overcoming setbacks, obstacles, and challenges to succeed in life. And that's why this component of the model is also very vital, because, folks, guys in recovery and ladies in recovery, we have a story to tell. And we don't just tell it with our lips, we tell it with our lives. And when we can find opportunities to get out and to show the world that we can do more than you think that we can, we rise to meet the occasion. We rise to the challenge. So once a person has understood their unique set of traits, they then can work with a counselor or a community member to find opportunities out in the community to put those pieces into practice, right? And so an example would be this. Let's say you score high on empathy. With the help of a counselor or with the help of somebody within the field, if you identify empathy as a trait that you are abundant within, perhaps a person could go to an assisted living facility or a nursing home and volunteer their time to sit and to prepare some meals or eat some meals with the clients there, right? And through doing this activity, they learn that, hey, I really am empathetic, and they may choose a career path in healthcare, for example, or they may even start a widow's ministry at church, right? You see how this grows and expands. And so here's the main message of entrepreneurial opportunities. We can give folks all the tools that they need for recovery, but if they just go back home and isolate, we've done them no good. If we don't allow them to meaningfully connect to their community, a huge piece is missing. We cannot remain in isolation, and entrepreneurial opportunities require us to get out there, to get connected, and to advance our calling. Fosters creativity and relationships, and it connects people to their communities. To hear more about that, I'd like to invite Brian Trevor to the stage.
I'll tell you one thing, there's a reason why Prince never opened for anybody. That's how you gonna follow that? I think we answered an age-old question today, which is between preachers and trial attorneys, who talks longer? Preachers win. I want to tell you that in my post-legal career, one of my greatest blessings has become to become friends with Jason Roop, because the work that Jason has done, the research is something I think we've all known, but nobody's ever done it before. You know, so this being just a friend of Jason and being involved in this research has just been an incredible opportunity to me. So I appreciate that. How many folks in here are, like I said, I'm a trial attorney, so if you've seen the Murdaugh trials, you know that I'm going to ask you questions. How many folks in here are work for a recovery organization, substance use disorder treatment, anything like that? Okay. How many folks in here do not work in that sector, but are strictly in some kind of business or something like that? All right, so we're pretty much talking to family. There's a couple of cousins in here. Pretty much talking to family. I tell you what, one of the things that we see through this is that what Jason's research has identified, we all kind of knew, but we never could really put our finger on. We didn't have a reason for. We have run across tons of people in my work with drug court. This is one of the guys that I've run across at work. But in my work in drug court, we always had the goal was not to enhance; it was to control. When this person has an addiction that's out of control, they need to be a good person in society. So we never looked at what worth the person had. If somebody wanted to go out and start their own business, no, you need to get a paycheck because we need to track you. We need to know you're showing up. Once we started changing, we saw these results. Once we started changing to allow people to express themselves for their natural instincts to come out, then we start seeing benefits like this. This is somebody who is now a national leader for somebody recovery. I think all of these will show what Jason's research has shown. My leadership traits that were once used for negative self-serving purposes are now used for the good, to help others find sustained recovery, train recovery leaders, break stigma, and advocate for addiction, mental health, and recovery support services all around the country. The entrepreneurial skills are there. We just have to allow them to blossom. One of the things in here is, Jason was talking about the light and the dark. I think he was impressed that we were probably the only two people from southeastern Kentucky that knew who Carl Young was. But yeah, so. Recovery forced me to take a long, hard look at myself, especially the things I don't like. I think that self-searching results in self-humility and self-awareness that serves us well in leadership roles. I think all of us who are not in recovery, who have not experienced addiction, but who are in leadership positions can definitely identify with this. I've always said that folks in recovery are some of the best people I've ever met, and I think that these kind of things show why. This guy was one of my guys in drug court, and he was one of the most difficult people I've ever met in my life. And the stories I've heard about Dr. Roop is that when he was in his addiction and early recovery, he was one of the most difficult people in the world. I know other folks who can be extremely difficult who are in recovery. And so, I mean, that chip on your shoulder, what we used to call, and if you've ever worked with someone who's just as involved, who's in addiction, where you always talk about you got to get that chip off their shoulder. Sometimes that's the thing that allows them to succeed, that resiliency. One of the things that you need in entrepreneurship of any type is you need to be risk averse. You're going to have to be the one that steps out from your safety net and take that chance that other people won't take. The traits in this study show all that. This guy, I've been a leader my whole life. Totally sounds like him. I'm just glad he didn't cuss in his quote like he used to in court all the time. It boiled down to what I channeled the ability toward, whether it be hustling or working. I find that I can adapt to anything, but most of all, I found that change was only possible when I got tired of the pain and consequences of the active addict lifestyle. This guy went from living on the street, selling drugs, to anytime he wanted to do something, he couldn't find a fit for himself, so he just did it himself. So that's an entrepreneur. Addiction requires a certain perseverance, so does recovery, and so does leadership. Perseverance through all of I've heard stories. One of the things I hear is, man, I don't want to get up and go to the meeting today, and I've heard other folks in recovery say, well, how far did you walk in the snow to go get the drugs when you need them? You know, it's that kind of perseverance that still sustains leaders and folks in addiction and recovery. It's like a superhero that goes from the dark side to the good side. They didn't lose their superpowers. They just stopped using them for crappy reasons. Exactly right. Who are the most, of the folks that are still in active use, in active SUD, how many of us in this room know folks that we have said this exact same thing about? That they are some of the most capable people out there at getting drugs, at avoiding drug tests, at trying to get out of cases, at stealing from their grandmothers, and all the things that they do. But in recognizing, I think a lot of times too, they don't recognize that they can be on the good side. They think that they're inherently bad. And one thing that Dr. Roop's research has not shown is that there's anyone that's inherently bad. I think that's one of the great things about this research is that it shows there are inherent good things in everyone if they're allowed to blossom in good structure.
So what does all this mean? Well, first of all, it changes how we view addiction. And I believe that a lot of people are fatigued, honestly, if I'm be truthful. But a lot of people are fatigued when we talk about addiction because it's always centered upon the problems. And of course there's problems associated with it. But this model allows us to approach the dynamic of addiction, the phenomenon of addiction, the disease of addiction from a different level, from a different perspective. It means that addiction is more than just a problem to be solved. It holds within it, and this is fascinating, within the destructive behavioral patterns and the manifestation of this disease, we see within that, beheld within it, are the keys to unlock the prison doors of it, so to speak. Good, like Brian said, can be found in everyone, and when you speak to that place of goodness, eyes light up, people come alive. When you call them something other than an addict, when you call them a person, or you call them by name, and you say that you not only are destined for greatness, you have so much potential, but you are valuable. You have a lot of worth, dignity in a heartbeat is delivered in that moment. Hope is renewed in that moment. And this shows that successful recovery can build upon the positive qualities of individuals, enhancing levels of commitment, empowerment, and purpose. And it's amazing how people's entire outlook will change when you share this knowledge with them. This also means that our external partnerships can be broadened for treatment providers to allow for resource development. Let me explain that for just a few seconds, right? So the Leadership Academy and Entrepreneurial Opportunities component of this model would allow treatment providers opportunities to connect with employers, with leaders of organizations to say, hey, I've got your leadership factory right here. Employers, you're going to love it. Treatment providers, you're going to love it. Your clients are going to love it even more. So this finally provides a structured and effective approach to leadership development within the treatment setting. Guys, for those of you that have people in a residential facility or IOP program, what you're working with is something beautiful. What you're working with is something powerful. You may not can see it with your naked eyes, but there's a lot of strength there. And in closing, my mom always told me to find the good things about everybody. My mom told me to always find the good in someone, no matter what. And I had no idea that she was sharing with me wisdom from above. Wisdom that I could share with you here today to change our world, to change our communities. And the best leaders, maybe you can say like I just said, maybe some of the best leaders you know are in recovery. They're dynamic, effective, powerful leaders. But also, some of the best leaders you've not yet met could be in active addiction today. But they're going to emerge from that adversity. They're going to emerge from that crisis. And they're going to be the leaders of tomorrow. Thank you all for your time. And I believe I do want to mention this. That's my website and the QR code. You can visit that. I've got copies of the 2 published journal articles on the website. Also, what you've seen here today. I know you've got a hard copy in front of you, and the chamber will have it on their website, but it'll also be on mine. And there's the QR codes to the other 2 articles. And I believe I may have left 30 seconds for questions. So,
I just want to say, I